Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're going to break down what is arguably one of the most rigorous and honestly most fascinating moral frameworks ever devised. We're talking about Immanuel Kant's theory of deontology. We'll look closely at the actual mechanics of how Kant believed we should all be making our moral choices, and then we're going to throw this framework into the ultimate ethical arena and see how it battles it out against competing philosophies.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with Kant's categorical imperative, dive into means versus mere means, test drive his two-step morality test, and finally, pit Kant against utilitarianism and David Hume. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Kant's categorical imperative. You know, to really understand Kantian ethics, we absolutely have to start with his foundation. And I mean, absolute foundation. The categorical imperative isn't just situational. It is a rigid, universal moral algorithm that binds all rational agents. It's, by definition, an unconditional command. That means you don't just get to opt out because of how you're feeling that day or what the specific consequences might be. It applies to everyone, everywhere, period.
But to actually apply this imperative in real life, Kant introduces another concept. Before we can even judge if an action is moral under his framework, we've got to look at the big picture and identify its maxim. Now, a maxim is essentially your intention. It's the general rule behind your action, but with all those hyper-specific details, the who, the when, the where, completely stripped away. You have to isolate that core underlying rule you're choosing to follow.
Section 2. Means versus mere means.
So how does Kant translate these incredibly dense concepts into everyday life? Well, let's look at a really practical example. Interacting with a bank teller to withdraw some money. In this scenario, you are absolutely using that person as a means to get your cash. But guess what? They're also using you as a means to earn their salary. This interaction is perfectly fine, totally acceptable, because both parties actually consent to it. However, if you were to make an insincere promise to someone, that's a completely different story. That is treating someone as a mere means, and in Kant's book, that is strictly prohibited. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the real dividing line in deontology. As philosopher Honora O'Neill summarizes it, true morality hinges entirely on whether the other person could fundamentally consent to your scheme. Think about it. If you make an insincere promise, you're deceiving them, right? Because they don't know your actual intention, they literally cannot, in principle, consent to your scheme of action. That deception strips away their autonomy, and for Kant, doing that is always, always wrong.
Section 3. Two-step morality test.
Okay, by taking these 2 steps, you can essentially evaluate literally any moral dilemma like a computer algorithm. Step 1, identify the maxim. Figure out the general intention that's driving your action. Step 2, evaluate consent. You have to ask yourself, could everyone involved possibly consent to this behavior based on that underlying maxim? Now, if your answer to step 2 is yes, you're good to go. The action is permitted. But if the answer is no, the action is unconditionally prohibited. There is absolutely no gray area here.
Section 4. Kant versus utilitarianism. So these 2 frameworks approach the world in entirely different ways. I mean, it's night and day. Utilitarianism evaluates actions based purely on consequences, specifically aggregate utility. It literally requires you to always take the action that produces the most overall happiness, which effectively leaves nothing optional. It's an incredibly demanding system, yet its principles are completely situational and flexible based on the outcome. Now, Kant's framework flips this entirely. It focuses purely on intentions and that principle of consent we just talked about. Because it relies on unbreakable, universal principles, some actions are just always wrong, no matter what the consequences are. But here's the amazing part. Making it actually less demanding than utilitarianism in a day-to-day sense, Kant allows for what are called supererogatory actions. These are things that are morally good to do, but are merely permitted, not strictly required of you.
Section 5. Kant versus David Hume.
All right, for our final matchup, we pit Kant against the naturalistic approach of David Hume. Hume essentially argues that ethics aren't objective facts at all. Instead, he takes this reductive naturalistic approach called sentimentalism. For Hume, morally praiseworthy actions are really just those that are agreeable or useful to yourself or to others. Moral judgments aren't derived from some universal algorithm. They're founded on feelings of approbation, basically derived from pleasure or utility. It makes ethics entirely a matter of sentiment, taste, or opinion. Hume famously declared that reason is the slave of the passions, basically meaning reason only serves an instrumental role in achieving what our desires dictate. It absolutely doesn't determine what those desires actually should be. When we contrast these two thinkers side by side like this, a really deep philosophical divide emerges. For the basis of morality, Hume relies on heteronomy, meaning you act simply to satisfy external desires and passions. Kant, as we saw, seeks a universal system of moral judgment. When it comes to intention, Hume focuses heavily on our psychological states and our feelings regarding the consequences of an action. Kant, he demands focus on the goodwill and the intention of the agent as the absolute sole standard. Because of this, the nature of the law for Hume is completely relativistic. Judgments can vary by person or geography. Kant, on the other hand, provides a universal moral algorithm that binds all rational agents under all circumstances. Finally, their views on freedom are just worlds apart. In Hume's Newtonian, naturalistic universe, true freedom is essentially an impossibility. It's an absurdity. But Kant actually rescues the concept of freedom by distinguishing between two worlds, the phenomenal world of strict causality and the noumenal world of freedom, which allows for the existence of free, autonomous moral agents.
So we've broken down Kant's rigid rules, we've applied his two-step test, and we've watched his theories clash against the outcome-obsessed utilitarians and the emotion-driven philosophy of David Hume. Based on everything we've unpacked today, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to consider regarding the true foundation of your own moral choices. Is morality really an unbreakable, universal algorithm that you are duty-bound to follow? Or is it, at the end of the day, just a matter of human sentiment?